Hey guys, welcome back to your Lake Fork Guide. Bit of a somber note today. All-time Lake Fork bass fishing legend Mark Pack has passed away much too soon. And today, we're going to let him talk fishing one more time.
They look like more. All right, let's wait.
This deal with Mark passing away, it's hitting a lot of us at Lake Fork really close to home. It's hitting us in the heart. It hurts pretty bad. And I think a lot of us are going to grieve and go about remembering and honoring Mark in our own ways. One thing that Mark did love to do is he always loved to share information. He loved to help others. He was always helping other guides, helping random people he didn't even know. When it comes to bass fishing, he would help them out on the lake and show them spots and show them techniques. And moreover than that, I think Mark was a very good leader and a very good spiritual helper for people. Mark was a fine example of a man that believed in the Lord. And I really just can't say enough about him. And it pains my heart. And it seems like we're a few days removed from Mark's passing now. And the further along that we get away from it, the worse it hurts a little bit. And the more shocking it becomes. I still haven't quite come to terms with it on my own. And so I had a few hours today, and I wanted to make this video because I've been, especially now, I really realize how truly blessed I was to have Mark come talk fishing with us on camera where we could share it for the world. And what I've got today is I've got an hour and a half of Mark Pack talking fishing, teaching fishing, cutting a joke here and there, just being Mark Pack. We've got an hour and a half from the seminars that he did with us over the years. So I wanted to share that with you guys. I wanted to put this out there, and this can be out there for all of us for forever. We can all hear Mark talk one last time for as long as we want to now. And that's one of the beautiful things about documenting stuff on social media and all that, is that it can live virtually forever. So we're going to put that out there. There's going to be an hour and a half of Mark talking fishing today, but I had a few hours this afternoon, and what I wanted to do was I wanted to come to the lake, just me and my dog, old Skeeter Bug. I wanted to come out here by myself. And I wanted to tool around the lake and hang out some areas that I know that Mark fished and Mark liked to fish. In fact, I'm sitting in an area right now, if you look over my left shoulder, there's a big giant laydown over there. And the last episode of the Scott Martin Challenge that Mark Pack filmed with his good buddy, very good friend, Scott Martin, Scott caught a fish off that big, crazy looking laydown over my left shoulder right there. On top of that, right outside of this pocket around the bend out in the middle over here, this is Birch Creek, and Mark Pack was fond of Birch Creek over the years. I know a lot of you guys that were customers of his have probably caught a bunch of big fish in Birch Creek with Mark over the years. And right around this corner, there's a big creek channel swing with a good creek channel drop off, and I know Packman was fond of that area, and he fished there a million times. So I guess my first step to processing this whole deal right now is I'm out here and I'm hanging out in some of the areas that I know Mark's been. You know, Lake Fork is very much hallowed ground when it comes to bass fishing. And now with Mark's passing, for me personally, some of these areas that I know he frequented, I'll think about him every time I'm here for the rest of my life. I just needed to say these few things before we get started into Mark talking fishing, which is what this video is really about, is getting to hear Mark teach and have fun and talk fishing one more time. But Mark, I just need you to, I need your family to know. I know you know this, but for Mark's family, he's got 2 sons, he's got a wife. So many people loved that man, and we're going to miss him more than we could ever say. And I know I will, as many of you will. So Mark, thank you for everything that you did for all of us in this community, from your innovative mind in the bass fishing world to just the way you treated all of us like your best friend, to every one-liner. Every time he had a joke, it always hit right at home. It was always perfect timing. You were just an amazing joy to be around, and we certainly appreciate everything you did for us, sir. So with that being said, I'm going to ease back over here and go to fishing a little bit. Why don't y'all listen to about an hour and a half of Mark Pack talking fishing.
I brought the heavy hitter, the old legend, Mr. Packman. Sir, thank you for coming and joining us tonight. We appreciate that. So they got a little prime rib special that goes on Friday night. You know anything about that?
Oh, yeah. I think I talked him into that.
You came up with your idea? What's going on Lake Fork, man?
Well, the lake right now is kind of in transition period. You know, we had our first major cold front this past weekend.
Yes, we did.
And that's going to cause the lake to start turning over. And the way you can tell, you just see them brown bubbles out there on the main lake. But the good news is, you can still catch them up in the creeks because the lake doesn't turn over, you know, shallower than about 15 foot, it doesn't turn over. So just go up in the creeks and look for them white herons and the gray herons. They'll kind of tell you where the shad are, and that's the number one key right now is finding the shad.
You put more value on one versus the other on white and gray?
Gray's probably the number one.
Yeah, I'm the same way. That's
sometimes when you don't see gray, you look for the white ones. But the gray ones are the ones you want to look for.
If you see both, definitely pay more attention. That's why I asked you, because that's what I do. So.
Yeah, the grays. So, and there's several ways you can catch them. But right now, they're feeding on a lot of them are feeding on smaller shad up in them creeks. So you want to throw smaller baits. Like we've been catching them on small top waters, choker style baits, and fish them kind of fast, but not too slow. Just keep them moving on top, and that's been my number one deal. Just top waters. So, and then I'm catching some on buzz baits early and stuff, smaller buzz baits, not the big ones.
Yeah.
But any kind of baits like that. Then when they kind of slow down, just kind of slow down, fish smaller worms, Texas rig worms. Instead of throwing a big 10-inch, you want to throw about a 7-inch worm. So.
How long do you usually stick to that shallow pattern before you start going back out to your bread and butter?
Usually it'll get better about the third week of October, and then into November it'll be really kicking deep. You need the water temperature to cool way down, because the hotter it is, the more oxygen the bass need. And when it turns over and they don't have that much oxygen, and it's still the water's warm, that's what shuts them down. So when we start getting more cold fronts, starts cooling down, we need to get cold quick now to get it to turn over quick and to get these fish fired back up. So, because if it's going to, a lot of times what we'll do is warm back up in the 90s, 80s, 90s for 2 or 3 weeks. That's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah.
Because it'll just bring it on out another 2 weeks.
That's kind of what we just came to. It was like 100 degrees last week, and then it cooled down and got in.
So if we'll get a good front every week, you know, another 2-3 weeks, it'll be back on deep.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Cool, man.
So how cool, when you say need to cool down, like in
the main lake needs to get down in the upper 60s, low 70s. What happens is, see right now, shad need more oxygen than bass do. They're the first ones to move in the creeks when it turns over.
Yep.
Or they'll move up on the point shallow. So they're loaded in there right now in them creeks, them shad. But when, like he said, when it starts getting cold again, they'll start moving back out. And that's when my bite will get good again. And that's usually into October, 1st of November.
Then when they come out of that and go to winter, you know, creek channel beds, and we go get us a jig, don't we?
That's right. Usually after Christmas is when I start flipping the jig on the channel beds.
Yeah.
That's usually when I start. But you can catch them, you know.
Don't be talking dirty to me now. I get all excited. You start talking about flipping that jig.
That's right. That's probably my favorite way to catch them, believe it or not.
So
but
much fun.
it is. You won't get a whole bunch of bites, but the ones you catch are big ones.
does that make a big difference too?
Well, it helps. This time of year, you know, you have more grass in the creeks, so the lake doesn't water up as much, muddy up as much as it does in the spring. Because in the spring there's not much grass, and the mud just flows through. That grass kind of filters it out, and they don't get muddied up, so you can catch them. And
but that water flow, it'll help push that turnover cycle through.
And what it does, it brings that fresh water in up in them creeks, and it's cooler. And that's why it's just so much better to stay in them creeks during the turnover, because you're getting that fresh water in. The water cools down cooler at night, but it doesn't.
Flowing water gives more oxygen.
Yeah, more oxygen and chatter in there. I mean, that's the place to be right now in them creeks. It just is.
You picking up a frog at all on some of that grass, man?
We threw a frog some today and yesterday. Customer caught one on a frog today, and he caught one yesterday on a frog. But like I said, he caught 3 or 4 on a buzz bait this morning, and then caught 5 or 6 on that the Aurealis small chugger bait like a popper. But he caught probably the most on it. And then this afternoon we went deep. But before we went deep, we flipped a little in the creek channels up here. Like I said, he caught that about an 80-pound Appaloosa flathead. That thing was huge, man.
No, tell me how you told me earlier. Come on, that was great. You flipped the jig down in there.
I told him flip. There's a lay down next to the creek drop. He works it through there. He said he got a good thump, man.
Yeah.
He said so that rod bows up and like it hangs him up. And that fish swim out of there, I guess. But he fought that thing for 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
We pulled the boat in the middle of the creek, John said, just take your time with it.
Yeah.
He got it up. That fish was as long as he was.
Yeah.
And his head was that wide. I mean, it was a giant.
You said you went to net him, just the head for the tail was just sticking out.
Yeah, I went to net him and the net broke. All we get in that net was his head. We left him up. We got him in the boat finally.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Pack will put you on giants of some sort when you come fishing with him.
He had a 50-pound scale in the boat that bottomed dead out.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, he picks that fish up and he's like, dude, this is heavier than a 50-pound bag of feed. I said, yeah, he's about 80 pounds. That thing was huge, man.
God, boy.
I couldn't believe he caught that thing.
Yeah, how he got that in the boat out of that timber, that's crazy. What
'Cause
kind of line do you use? Because that's some good stuff.
Yeah, he was using it.
Mark, when you said after a while you went out deep, what do you call it deep?
I went down the dam where there's a lot of fish down there. They're just hard to catch. But we did manage to catch 2 of them out there. It was like 20, it was a drop from 25 to 28.
Okay.
They were sitting there. And he pulls up, second cast catches one. Fish there another hour, not a bite. So we go to the next spot, throws out there on his third cast, catches another one. I said, well, it's time to leave.
Yeah. It's one by deal.
Yeah,
One trick
it's like a
combo.
one-spot deal, but
Yeah.
there were some big ones down there. We just couldn't get them to react to nothing.
Yeah.
And usually when that happens, fish as slow as you can,
Yeah.
because them fish ain't moving much. Just throw that Carolina rig out there and drag it real slow. Just kind of stop, 5 to 10 seconds,
Almost dead stick.
just dead sticking
Yeah.
it. And same way with the drop shot, you can just throw it over and just let it sit there.
Yeah.
And basically just fish slow as you can.
That's right. That's right.
Yep.
What bait are you throwing on the Carolina rig?
I'm throwing my 5-inch impact shad. Deep, I'm throwing that chartreuse pepper. I can just see it good deep. Usually when I get shallower, say 18, 15, 18, I switch to it like a green color
I've been throwing
watermelon.
that watermelon red magic that you makes
Yeah.
been the one we were throwing most
Yeah,
of them in
yeah,
grass.
that's a good one.
Yeah. What's your deal that you kind of key on when you get back out there?
They look for the best ambush areas to feed on them shad. They don't like to work hard.
Right.
And stuff like that, you know, drops, ups and downs like you're talking about. They sit right on that edge. When them shad come through, they
Right.
hit it and they have to come up over it. And the fish sit right there.
That's right.
So basically looking for them ambush points. But probably the best advice I give them for this fall when they get deep is fish the wind. Fish the windy bank.
Boy.
Where that wind's blowing in on them points, them deep points,
Yeah.
it just gangs them up so much better. And if you fish the flat side of the lake, you know, the calm side, they don't gang up like that.
Right.
But you get on that windy side, that's where they're at. That's where your big spoons and tail spinners and
That's when it comes in.
moving baits work good in that wind.
It's good. That's
And
a
I
fishing
probably
spot.
fish a spoon a lot different than a lot of people do. A lot of people hop it, you know,
Yeah.
hop it. I just throw it out and let it go to the bottom.
Yeah.
And I'll put my rod at about a 45-degree angle.
Mhm.
And all I'll do is crank it 5 cranks and then stop.
Like it's
And
swimming
let it
up.
fall on a tight line. It just kind of flutters a little slower. And sometimes it seems to key them better.
Yeah.
And you can catch them hopping that thing, but I catch so much more just letting it fall on a tight line. And it flutters slower, and it seems to trigger them pretty good sometimes. And then another key, you know, like later in the fall when it starts getting pretty cold and it gets tougher, take that, just spoon, that Joe Spade spoon, throw it out there, and just drag it on the bottom.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
was
he's
gonna
told me.
say.
He's told me that a million times. He goes, quit fishing it so hard,
Just
son.
drag it on the bottom, and they'll eat that
man.
thing.
I know. I
Stir
know.
the
Because when
mud.
it starts getting real cold, them fish will sit right on the bottom.
Yeah.
When you catch them, they'll have mud on their belly.
Yeah.
And what they're doing, they're getting radiating heat off the earth because it's warmer right there.
Look at here.
That's what they're doing.
How about that?
The other thing you don't want to overlook is fishing it like you do your wacky worm. It looks like a fish is trying to swim, but is dying.
Yep.
Boom, boom, drop it.
Yeah.
Like I tell a lot of people, fishing kind of like a Texas rig.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just do that right there and let it hit bottom. Let it sit there. All of a sudden, now, a lot of times they'll hit it off the bottom, just, boom,
Yep.
just like a worm.
Yeah,
But there's just a lot of little tricks like that you learn from doing it a lot.
yeah, all the time. Sure.
And like people that just come out here don't know,
Yeah,
they fish it wrong.
and they get out there, they see the fish on the graph, and then they get out there, they go to hop in it, and they don't get bit.
Yep.
And then Mark Pack comes along and just kind of swims it up and lets it fall slow, and he's catching them. And it can be something that small.
Mm-hmm. Something little bitty like that can make a big difference.
It can. It
Yeah.
can. Especially, and it's as those fish get into that fall deal offshore, they get in big schools.
Yep.
And they will gather up into some big schools at
That's
some
when
point
you
in the
can
fall.
really whack them.
And a lot of times it's just about getting one to go.
Yeah.
You
You
know-
get one to fire up, you can get them going.
And if you're doing the wrong technique,
Yeah.
right, the right technique comes in there and gets one of them just to lash out at it, boy, now all of a sudden you got something.
And I've seen it where you're on a big school,
Mhm.
and if you fish that big spoon wrong, like ripping it, you'll spook them.
They'll leave. Yes.
They'll leave.
Yes.
And
Yeah, you can be too aggressive with it. I agree 100% there.
I've seen it happen too in the summer. Usually after about June, them big fish won't hit a deep dive crankbait real good anymore.
Yeah.
And if you're on with a Carolina rig, someone breaks out a big crankbait, you'll spook them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like Carolina rigging. You throw it there, you can't catch them. And then you'll reel in real fast, make another cast, and they'll smash it. You ever have them do that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hell, I've had them take the Carolina rig
Yeah.
about take the rod out of my hands when you're reeling it in sometimes.
And
They
it's
come
all
back.
reading what the fish are doing at the time. Try different things until find something that works. That's the thing about fishermen is they try anything to catch fish.
They will.
If
If you tell them they got to jump in the water, swim around the boat 3 times, to get them fired up, boy, that'd be people taking a dive.
That's right.
I would.
Are you fishing the big swim baits deep in the wintertime?
I do. I fish some deep. And one of the biggest keys that I've learned fishing them deep is I use a lot of those soft plastic ones.
Uh-huh.
But the key to it's using a real heavy weight. On a jig head, I'll use a 2 ounce. Something that hits hard when it hits.
Yeah.
I don't know what it does to trigger them, but it'll trigger them to bite it. Because the way I fish it, I kind of slow roll it and then stop it. And it hits the ground. I guess it kicks up a puff of smoke. I don't know, dust.
Huh.
But I'm telling you, that'll key them to bite.
Also, that probably makes that when you stop it and it falls, it makes that tail
Yeah,
real
but
hard.
they eat that thing when you got to hit. I use like a 2 ounce to do it.
So you use an ocean net to catch 80-pound ops, and you use ocean jig heads on big swim baits.
Hey, back in the day, man, I bet it was 25 years ago, maybe 30. I used to buy these 10-inch sassy shads they used up there on the stripers and at Texoma. And that's where I learned it. And I'd get them. First, I tried a 1 ounce jig head, and we'd catch a few. And I'd ran out, and I'd had some 2 ounce. And dude, I started crushing on that thing, on that big sassy shad,
Boy,
out deep.
that was the beginning notations. You didn't even know it of the
That's
impact shad.
That's
wasn't
right. That's right.
Sounds like a big chatterbait with a finesse fish on
it?
it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But a lot of times you learn things just by doing different things, trying different things out. They ask me if certain people are good guys. I just say, hey, there's no such thing as a good guy. Some are just better than others. They're like attorneys.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point.
There's no such thing as a
Tom.
good one.
That's right.
Some are just better than others, right?
That's 100%. I can go along with that all day.
Something like Texas.
Yeah.
So what brand 2 ounce jig head are you talking about using?
The one I use is made by Owner. It's like a saltwater jig head.
Ocean gear.
It's got a big Owner hook in it. And it's just a big it looks similar to it's kind of rounded nose, and it's flat on the back where your swim bait goes up against it. But it's made by Owner.
Like a 10-aught, 8-aught?
It's got a big hook in it. Probably an
Most
8,
of the-
8 to a 10.
Yeah, most of those are an 8 or a 10 on
Yeah,
1
but
ounce or bigger.
that's what I use.
Yeah.
It's an Owner.
Now, on your swim bait on that big jig head, are you using those big hollow bellies? What kind of swim bait is it? Is it a solid body, wide tail wag, or is it
Man,
a
I
hollow
use
belly?
different things.
Do you?
Yeah, a lot of times I use a lot of those they use in the spring, that have that weighted, that line through.
Oh, like the line through stuff.
Yeah, but I make my own in my garage. I got just a mold of it.
Yeah.
Just where you don't put that weight in there. You just pour it solid
Yeah.
and just put the jig head in.
So like a 7-inch or so long swim bait. Yeah, that's good. That's good. I just wondered if there was a different tail action specific to the wintertime. Because I know in the summertime, you know, most guys throw the hollow nose
Usually
on the
I like
big
a-
heads.
I don't like a big wide deal. You know, pretty about a medium wobble. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the most important, like I said, is that weight. It
Yeah.
triggers me.
Well, sometimes we get tied up on that swim bait. I'm pretty sure that, like in the springtime, when everybody's fishing big swim bait shallow, I'm pretty sure you can put a line through treble hook on a Snickers bar.
Yeah.
If you can make it swim slow enough, you can catch them.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when they get to biting something that big, if it's moving, if it's big and it's moving in the water, they're going to eat it. You know, and so probably the same deal on jig head. As long as it's got something kicking back there, it probably wouldn't be all that.
And a lot of times, like you know, I fish in the summer. I fish my impact shad, the big one, weightless.
Yeah.
I do it a lot in the wintertime too.
Do you?
Fishing it slow, just twitching it, letting and killing it.
Suspended fish, you mark suspended fish on the graph like you do in the
no,
summer?
that
or
time when they're on the bottom, I fish it.
you get it down to the bottom and fish it.
And just
Wow.
like Joe did with that spoon,
Right.
just fish it slow.
Huh. That's one I've never
It's
heard.
kind of like a worm.
Because I know like the summer deal is mostly
Yeah.
suspended fish.
Yeah.
You see them on your graph
Yeah.
suspended,
Yeah.
set up on them, count it down
But I
to
do
them.
that a lot in the winter too.
How
that
do
on
you
the
get?
one.
How do you keep it down there?
Do use big hook.
Big hook.
Yeah. Weighted hook.
And just, you got to be patient to get it down there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Now, if
but,
the wind's blowing hard that day, you're probably not going to be able to do that.
I use about a 7/0.
but you are using a weighted hook.
No, when I said weighted hook, I didn't mean weighted
Oh.
hook. I mean just a heavy hook that's weighted. You know,
big
that's what
heavy
I mean.
gauge.
And
7
it'll
ounce.
stay
Big wire.
down.
I use usually a Trocar 6/0, EWG, the big bite.
Yeah.
Now, it takes a while to get down there. It falls about 6 inches per second. So if you're in 30 foot, it's going to take you a minute.
They're not, most fishermen are not patient enough to let it go down to the
Hey,
bottom.
listen, Pack, if I ever get on a boat with you and we're doing that,
But
I'm
I've
going to
learned
bring
it
some cold
through
beers,
experience.
man.
You'll throw out there and just maybe have to go to the bathroom or get you a drink.
Yeah, I'm bringing the cooler full of cold beer.
You know,
with me.
and then there's fish on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's how I learned to fish slow sometimes.
yeah.
Just fish it slow. But that's how I fish that shad a lot.
You know what? For years, before I caught my first 10-pound fish that I ever caught, for years my personal best was 9 pounds 9 ounces for a long time. And my wife takes full credit for this because I was out fishing after work one day years ago, and she called me to talk to me on the way home from work, and I had just worm fishing, you know, but throwing it out there, and she called me, and so I just pushed the button, stripped the line, pulled the pipe on.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I know I'm in trouble like always. I get it. Yeah, I'm the worst husband. I understand. Oh, hey, I gotta go. He was swimming off with just sitting on the bottom, man. That was the biggest fish I caught for years.
A lot of times, when fish trying to tell you something, tell you to slow down. That's
Yeah.
the number one thing I tell my customers.
Boy, I mean,
They got to slow down.
yeah.
Especially out deep. You just got to slow down. You're fishing too fast, especially in the heat of summer.
Yeah.
They start fishing too fast, you ain't going to catch them.
Mark,
Enjoyed
thank
it,
you very
man.
much, guys that are watching out there. Is it what's your website? Mark Pack.
MarkPackLakeFork.com.
MarkPackLakeFork.com. Look him up. Check him out. He won't tell you. He won't admit it. He won't own up to it. But this dude's a legend. He's a legend. I'm telling you. Look him up. Book a trip. He's awesome. Thank y'all for watching. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. His name is Mr. Mark Pack. So y'all give him a big
Hey,
round.
I do.
Big round. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mark.
Well, glad to be here. Hopefully, I can help y'all find fish and catch fish. And the way I'd like to start it is just any kind of questions y'all have relating to like the current patterns and what the fish will be doing. Just any question y'all have. And there's no question that's a stupid question in fishing. So go ahead and fire off on some of your questions.
What does rain do to the fish?
A lot of what it'll do to the ones in the backs of the creeks, it'll probably shut them down because it's so muddy. And right now, I'm sure the lake's still coming up, even though they got the gates open. But once that lake starts dropping, it's going to hurt them even worse. But there's a good equalizer with that. Fish just don't want to get trapped shallow, so they kind of move out and suspend a little, and they're harder to catch, especially in the shallower, muddier water. But some of the best things to counter that is first thing, move to clearer water. Especially on this creek, you can find creeks that are kind of dead end creeks that don't have a lot of runoff in them, and that's what you kind of want to look for. And another thing is you'll have fish that are in different stages of moving up. Some of them are already up and committed, but the major move for the fish to come shallow is usually when the water hits 52 to 55 and you have a full moon. So once they pull up, they're committed. They're not going to pull back deep next time a front hits. So that's basically what we're waiting on, is that first big wave to move up. But there's a few there now, but the majority hadn't moved up yet. Like today, I was grabbing some in the mouths of creeks, 30 feet of water, and they were suspended at 10 feet down. But it's hard to get those to bite because the sun's not out. If the sun will come out, they'll suspend even higher, and you can catch them good on a jerk bait. But we're about a week away from everything busting loose. We got the full moon next week, and I don't think I've seen the sunshine in I don't know how long. And that's what you need, is sunshine, to get that water warmed up and get the fish what they need to do. But with these fronts every 2 or 3 days, it just makes it tough. But some of the best things to look for, like in the backs of the creeks, is look for channel swing banks or channel swing points, because fish look to go from shallow, and they want deep water access close by when a front hits. That way they can drop down in it and equalize their bladder with their barometric pressure where they don't feel sick. And that's basically what a lot of the bigger fish will do. And so you want to look for channel swing banks closest to spawning flats, and that's where they'll be staged, back in the backs of the creeks mostly. And then sometimes you'll catch staged on secondary points that run out on the drops. They're looking for them drops is what they look for. But and then another deep pattern right now, like I was telling you, those suspended fish. I've got a lot of big fish suspended out in those big treetops that hadn't really moved up yet, but they'll suspend up and get the sun, and you can catch them once it warms up some. And some of the best baits to do that are jerk baits, crank baits, but I like using fluke style baits. I use my impact shad. I use the bigger one usually. And you can work it through the tops of that timber pretty good. You can catch some pretty good fish. And a lot of those fish don't even get messed with in the springtime. Most people are up in the backs of the creeks or up shallow. And some of my best days I've ever had are out 20, 25 feet out in the mouths of the creeks on suspended in timber. But any other question?
Carolina, you need the sun for that?
Huh?
You need the sun for that?
It's better when it's sunny. But you can catch when it's cloudy too. But it needs to warm up. That water temp needs to be 55 usually, and when that pattern gets real good.
Now, wait a minute, you told me 54.
I lied to you.
Are you throwing weightless or Carolina rigging?
Well, out in that timber, I'm throwing it weightless because I want to keep it at their zone. I can count it down to the zone they're at and then work it through their zone, twitching it and pausing it and keeping it at that depth zone. But one of the best patterns is going to come up here in about another 2 or 3 weeks. Once the main lake hits 55, they'll make a big push up on the shell beds, and that's one of the best patterns on the lake for catching big ones. And you probably know that one.
Well, I've been seeing on Facebook stuff that they've been catching fish in shallow, like 6 foot of water. Is that?
Well, yeah, they will. Well, let me tell you what happens. Once it gets real cold after Christmas, the fish are still deep. I mean, out there. But that cold water sinks to the bottom and heat rises, so the warmest water is going to come to the top. All those fish that were on the bottom you were catching in November, December, they're all suspended, and you're not going to catch them on the bottom. The only way you're going to catch them is like I was telling you, through suspended. And they won't be much deeper than 15 foot and 30 foot. They're all going to be suspended. And that's why you can go out there and graph like 100 spots, and you might see one fish deep on the bottom. They're just not out there. Unless they're in hibernation mode, then you got to snag them with a spoon. You know what I mean? But if they're any active at all, they're going to be out.
First, spit it up there like that. You got bait around?
You don't have to, but usually there is bait around. And another thing I'll look for, like today when I was looking for some fish, best thing right now is look for those loons out deep. They'll tell you where the bait is. Just kind of drive around till you see them loon. And but the birds will tell you where they're at. Always follow them birds. They'll tell you where the bait is.
What about Main Lake Points?
Main Lake Points? Yeah, Main Lake Points, that's fixing to be a big deal coming up as soon as that's where they're going to go to. And they'll usually pull up in about 15 to 20 first. You can catch them there. And then they're going to get up there in that 5 to 10. And that's when it's really going to get good. Because when they first move up, they're hungry and you can catch them before they get pounded on. And sometimes you just got to run and gun until you find them, you know. But I hit some of that today, and I found some 55-degree water, but I just couldn't get bit on it yet. It might be waiting on the moon next week.
Is it warmer on the north end as on the south end?
Yeah. I found Main Lake water 55 today, this afternoon up there, but I couldn't catch them. And I seen some down there, I just couldn't get them. But it's just got to get right. We're almost there. It's a timing deal. But like I said, you can just go down the bank up in some of the creeks that are clear and throw chatterbaits and spinnerbaits and small crankbaits and catch them. But I don't know if you're going to catch them real big ones. You can. I'm not saying you can't, but you'll catch a lot of unders. But the big surge of them big ones ought to be moving up out deep once that water gets right and the moon's right. Yeah.
These fish don't like that water moving above their head and under the body, do they?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a while. This water's up, and it's going to keep let these gates open.
Yeah, once they close gate, it shouldn't take over a week to. How high is it? Maybe a foot?
A little lower.
Yeah, it shouldn't take long. But sometimes about fishing, you can overthink yourself. You'll think they should be doing something, but they ain't. And then there's times they shouldn't be biting, and they'll be biting.
Been there.
And I don't understand that sometimes. You know?
That's every day, man. Every day I go on a guide trip and I get there in the morning, I'm like, whew, y'all ready? We fixing to smoke in the day. Boy, at the end of the day, there's some long faces.
I know. And then days you're like, man, it's cold out here. They ain't going to bite. And then you whack them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I thought I
think it's
wasn't very
being a
good.
guide. About the time you get two guys that know how to fish, you tell them, oh, it's game on, and they struggle. Then you get two people that don't know how to fish, and you tell them, well, it's been real tough lately. We're going to have to work for it. And
They
they
whack
catch
'em.
them like crazy.
I know. That's fishing.
Yes, sir.
That's just the luck of the newbies.
But another thing I found more this year is some grass in the lake. We caught some out of the grass this morning with chatterbaits, but they were little ones, 2-pounders. But couldn't catch no big ones out of the grass. I'm sure there's some in there, but we just didn't catch them. But I caught my biggest one on a shell bed, but it wasn't on Main Lake shell bed. It was up in a creek. It was about a 4.5-pounder. And I caught it on my first cast up there. I'm like, ooh, it might be on. Never got another bite. Sat there for like 45 minutes. But I must have had it. As soon as it hit the water, it dropped maybe 3 foot and it was on there. I'm like, well, maybe they're in here, but it's just kind of a crapshoot right now.
It's a run and gun situation.
It is. One thing I didn't try, and you can get you crank them Main Lake points at about 15, 20 foot with a deep diver. You might catch some big ones doing that, but I just didn't want to do that today.
Is that a repeated cast, grind it out, sit there and make the same cast over and over again type of deal?
If you know they're there, but if not, just run and gun and pull up on a point where you think they ought to be and crank it, make 10 cranks. They ain't there, go to the next.
Gotcha.
Just keep moving. Eventually you're going to hit them somewhere, usually. But another good pattern that a lot of people don't do this year, and maybe they do, but I don't see them doing it, is fishing like strounger heads under the bridges on the pilings. Because usually in March I catch some good ones doing that under the bridges that hadn't moved up yet, and you can catch some good ones on the bridges.
Talking about the creek arm bridges?
Just these Main Lake bridges.
Main Lake bridges?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just slow rolling it next to those cross beams, and just a lot of those fish are on the next wave that hadn't moved up yet. You know what I'm saying? Because the last wave won't spawn until like the end of April, usually, and they're still out there. But on rig's right. Lizards are real good. I'll throw a lot of lizards in the springtime and brush hogs.
What color?
If it's dingy water, I like that. What's it called? Chartreuse pumpkin chartreuse. It's like a laminate, really. It's like they took a pumpkin seed and dipped it in chartreuse, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But that's a good one. And then in clear water, I'll throw like a watermelon red with a chartreuse tail.
More natural.
Yeah. And then, of course, on chatterbaits, I like just like a watermelon red with orange in it. And jigs, something with pink, green pumpkin and orange is good.
Was black or blue work?
Yeah, I catch them black and blues. So, but that orange seems to be better.
Something about orange this time of year, isn't it? It is something about orange.
Yeah.
Crawfish.
Yeah. Yep.
Got one over here.
Hey, Mark, with the conditions we have this time, or currently, right? Inevitably, the farther you get back to the creeks, the muddier the water's going to get. I mean, almost to the point of chocolate milk.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to that point, do you just turn around, or do you still fish that water? And if you do, are you throwing like a real bright color or a dark color? Big bait, small bait, fast retrieve, slow retrieve? I mean,
Usually in muddy, it depends.
muddy water scares me.
Like, the biggest tournament I ever won was in muddy water in springtime. And that was at Beaver Lake. Everybody went to the clear and I went to the muddy end. Then I found them real shallow on old boat ramps and parking lots and stuff. But once you find them, you can. But the deal there was the water wasn't as cold. The cold muddy water would hurt you. Now if it's warm, warming up and muddy, you can still catch them if it's stable, if the water's stable and not moving up or coming down. If it's more stable and above, say, 60 degrees, you can catch them. But like right now, it's kind of tough.
And in that muddy water, do you prefer, or like that real dark muddy water, do you prefer a real bright color or a darker
In muddy
color?
water, I like something with chartreuse in it for belly or the tail or orange.
Yeah.
But the whole thing doesn't have to be bright like that. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Just got to have that little piece to it.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't want to get too loud with it. But yeah.
I got you.
Anybody else?
There's an open book of some epic amount of knowledge out here. Alabama rig.
Yeah, you can throw them on Alabama. You can catch them on Alabama rig, especially through them trees out there. But I just don't throw it; it's too hard to throw. Yeah, but I made a jig head, a weedless jig head, just for that, where you can swim it through that timber.
That's right.
But it'd just wear you out throwing that thing all day. But you can do it, a young guy. But yeah,
How fast would you swim?
slow. Just barely turn it. Just enough to get them blades turning on that thing. Yeah.
Do you like what's your preferred blade configuration if you are going to throw an Alabama rig? You like the 8-blade rigs, 4-blade rigs, big blade, small blade? What do you think?
The more blades is usually better.
Right.
But I've caught them on just the 4-bladed ones.
Right.
But the 8-blade's probably better.
Gotcha.
Just seems like the more flash and the more disturbance in the water.
If you're going to throw a big old umbrella, you're
Yeah, you
going to
might as
go
well go
all
all
out.
the way.
Yeah.
Might as well look like a chandelier.
That's right. That's right. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And big swim baits ought to start working pretty soon too.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we are getting close to that time. I agree there.
Yeah, but big swim baits, man, you can catch some big ones on that.
You'd mentioned swim bait
Uh-huh.
here pretty soon.
Yeah.
I wish I'd thought about asking this question last week, but I didn't.
Mhm.
But, you ever take a swim bait out in like 20 foot of water and just go through the working it in the
Oh
timber?
yeah, oh yeah. Just, all you got to do, like if I'm out deep, and remember what I said, a lot of them are going to be suspended up, so you don't want it going past 20 foot. So your best weight on a big swim bait, like on a jig head with it, is about a ½ ounce. And if you want to keep it up at around 10 foot, you want to put a 3/8 ounce on the front of it, on a jig head. But in the summer when they go deep, I throw a lot of 1 ounce and stuff. to keep it down. Then you got to reel it slow just to keep it down there. But in the springtime up shallow, like a lot of them big swim baits have a weight already inserted in them, and they're usually a 3/8, and they work good up shallow. 3/8 slide weight that's inside. But yeah. And another thing I'll do, I'll kind of especially rig it. You know, most of them swim baits have that line through, and then you got the treble hook on the bottom. Well, that treble hook's going to hook everything on the bottom, all them roots and stuff that grow. And what I'll do is I'll let's see, what do? I take it out, and I just put a regular swim bait jig head, the one I make. It's got a weed guard on it, and I'll hang a big treble hook on the back over the hook, you know, like a trailer hook on it, where the hook's on top, and you don't hang up all the time. And another thing it does, 90% of all them big fish you catch on a swim bait that has a hook on the belly, it's going to hook in their gills and they're going to bleed, and you'll kill a lot of fish that way. And that's another reason I like the trebles on top of the back of the swim bait, where it hooks them in the roof of the mouth, and they don't bleed and they won't die. But that makes a big difference.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
If you only had tomorrow to fish,
Yeah. What would I do?
what part of this lake would you go to, and you only had one lure to use, what would it be?
Oh,
Tomorrow, had one lure, and what would I do with it? I would probably have a 1/2 ounce jig, and because you can fish it deep, you can fish it shallow, you can fish it suspended, and I would target channel swing banks, like I was telling you, and look for big wood laydowns, brush piles, probably halfway up in the creeks where it's not too muddy, and also ends of secondary points, and I target anywhere from 10 to 15 foot. And the biggest key, once you find them, you got to slow way down to get a bite a lot of times. I mean, you got to throw it out and let it hit the bottom and shake it and count 20 seconds before you move it again. And a lot of times, if you fish it normal speed, you won't get a bite. But if you slow down, if you can get a bite and you get the confidence in it, then you'll know you got to fish slow. I mean, just slow. And it's hard to do with a jig sometimes. But in the summertime, you don't have to fish slow, but now you do. I mean, you got to make yourself fish it slow. And that's the difference between them wanting to eat something or a reaction bait. Now, reaction bait, they're just going to hit it because it's moving fast. They're to react to it. But a jig, they won't hit it like that usually. You got to fish it slow to get a bite. But once you find them and you fish it right, get the right technique down, fishing it slow and how they want it, then you'll catch them. But the hard thing about it is, if you're on a new body of water and you hadn't fished it much, it's hard to fish slow pre-fishing. Because you're eating your time just fishing so slow. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And that's where it's advantage if you know the lake real good. You know where they're at. You just got to slow down to catch them. You know?
You have a hole that you fish year round. You know those fish are there all the time. You got resident fish. And it's muddy as all get out.
Yeah.
Would you still go back and fish it really slow?
I would try it, yeah. I've caught them in muddy water here this time of year, real slow.
Real slow.
Yes.
Chatterbait?
Well, chatterbait, yeah, you can just enough to get the blades going. Yeah. Fish it slow. And also, throwing a jig if it's not in the grass, you know what I'm saying? Or on the outside edge, you can fish it real slow.
Throw a jig on the outside edge up against the grass?
On
the bank?
Yeah. If them fish are there, if I know they're there, that's what I fish it real slow. Another thing you can do is throw a deep diving crankbait just bouncing off the bottom real slow and get them to react to it. You know? Something to get in their face and make them react to it. Yeah.
I fished a tournament here last year,
and all a couple slot fish.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't catch one over, one under.
Right.
What was I doing wrong? Now, I mean, I go to any other lake, I'd be as happy as could be.
I know.
I got a spot. I got an other spot. I'll trade you for that spot. I know that.
Yeah.
That's right.
But it doesn't weigh any fish in it.
Well, a lot of times fish will school together by year class.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because they kind of were born at the same time. They school up together at the same time. They all move deep at the same time. They all come back in. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's how they'll do sometimes. And sometimes you just got to leave that spot and just go try some, try some other things. Either go shallower or deeper. Usually in the summertime, your bigger fish are going to be deeper than the smaller ones.
Smaller ones.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the very few bites.
You'll get a lot less bites.
With all the baits these fish have seen,
Yeah.
and they've seen everything this store's
Yeah.
got.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Walmart's.
And whatever. It doesn't,
Yeah.
tomorrow, next week, next month,
Yeah.
what are you gonna go to first?
Well, thing about baits is each bait you can fish them different, and sometimes it's not the bait that's wrong; it's the way you're fishing it. You know, the cadence you got, the speed. Are you hopping it fast? You know what I mean? Yep. Certain little things will make them bite.
Hard bait or plastic bait?
Yeah, either one, same. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes a crankbait, they want you to burn it. Sometimes they want you to stop it and crawl it. You know what I mean? It just depends. They're funny, man. But usually, this time of year when it's cold, sometimes you got to do erratic things to get them to trigger on it. You know? And that's like a lot of times you're throwing a chatterbait in the grass, and when you go to rip it, get your blade. That's when they'll hit it because they think it's getting away, or like a cat jumping on something. You know. And sometimes out deep, there's times I've seen things in tournament situations where you're flipping in 3 to 5 feet of water, and you can throw a half-ounce jig till you're blue in the face, and you can put a 1 ounce on there and crush them. It's just the rate of the fall, it gets them to bite it. But funny things like that. And I learned that from Denny Breyer. A lot of times he'll throw a 1 ounce jig in 3 foot of water, and he don't tell nobody that. Just that fast fall will get them to trigger and hit it. And you can throw a half ounce all day and won't get a bite. But it's stuff like that people learn just by doing things. It might have been a mistake. Well, I got a 1 ounce jig, I don't tie them, let me try it. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But things like that, they'll trigger them to bite. And any given day is kind of different. And I've seen people burn a spinnerbait when it's cold and catch them. But normally they don't, but sometimes they do. But it's just like, and a lot of times different bodies of water fish a little different. Fish act different. Like on lakes that have more current or lakes that don't, or if you have a highland reservoir versus a lowland reservoir. And then once you get into tidal rivers, it's a whole different thing. And then regular rivers, then you have natural lakes that have no creeks and no points in it. It's totally fishes different. So you got like 5 different bodies of water you got to figure out when you're fishing the tour. But down here we just got lowland reservoirs, and usually they fish better than anything, the lowland reservoirs, because they got everything in them.
All the right structure, very little current for the most part. It's all stable, very stable.
Just like them river lakes, like Pickwick and all them.
Yeah.
And Kentucky Lake, they don't bite until that current moves.
Yeah, 0-0 right there.
But it does it all the time. They're used to it.
Right.
In Fork, they don't move it that often. It messes them up.
Yeah.
We got a grass problem here bad.
Where?
It's called no grass.
Well, there's some grass.
More grass right now than there has been in a while.
Maybe so.
But you got to go way up the lakes to get to it. It's not on the lower end.
That's right.
Yeah. And I wish it would come back, but
What about that other weed that Salvinia? Is it still from?
I haven't seen any. No.
And that 8 degrees that we had in January pretty much puts a big kink in that Salvinia's plans right there.
Yeah. But
I read somewhere yesterday that they found it on Lake Athens.
did they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can tell you this, a lot of the people I don't mean to be jumping.
No, I want you to.
A lot of the people that, the weekend anglers are people that maybe just don't know the vegetation types as well as others. Now, we have a lot of hyacinth on this lake, and we had a big boom of it this last year. They see hyacinth, especially dead hyacinth, and they call it salvinia. And they call Texas Parks and Wildlife and report it, this, that, and the other, and it becomes a deal where Texas Parks and Wildlife is out here hunting for it, and word gets around. But the majority of the floating vegetation that we have in this lake, 99.9% is water hyacinth. And I promise you that 8 degrees put it down this year. When it gets that cold, that hyacinth has a hard time coming back. Now, we have another warm winter next year, it may cycle back, but it'll be a year or two before it gets like it was this summer.
That's a good thing.
Yes. Yes, it is. It was starting to get out of control a little bit. It was.
And just some little tips leaving here. Like certain things that I always do fishing this lake is on Carolina rigs, I don't care if I'm 30 feet or if I'm 1 feet of water, I always throw a 1 ounce weight. And most people try to go lighter, but the thing is with 1 ounce, what that weight does when you're dragging it or shaking it, it's kicking up silt on the bottom and it attracts some fish to it. Like they think it might be a bait, rooting on the bottom, and go over and look, and then they see the bait behind it and you catch them. But that makes a lot of difference, just a little bitty deal like that. And a lot of times, and the way you fish it, some days they want you just to drag it real slow, and some days they want you to shake it and stop it, and some days they want you to just reel it real slow. But right now, probably the best thing to do is I'll shake it some and just let it sit there and drag it just a little bit and fish it slow. But that's important with a Carolina rig, is a heavy weight. A lot of people, they'll have like a 3/8 ounce weight on there. Then I'll change it. Or they'll fish with a while, and then I'll notice the other guys wearing them out. I'm like, you might want to change it down. But that makes a big difference on a Carolina rig. And there's probably more big fish caught on this lake on Carolina rig than anything out deep. I mean,
I've heard a lot of guys are going to 5 foot leader instead of a 3.5.
I always used a longer leader than most people, and people are like, well, you use a longer leader. It's because it got more action. When you move that bait has more time to travel one side or the other if you have a bait that kind of glides to one side or the other, and it gives it better action. Like a pot, it'll dart side to side. A short leader, it won't do that very, very good. You know what I'm saying?
Do you shorten it up at all this time of year to tighten that action for slower bite conditions? No?
The only time I would shorten one up is if I'm fishing in grass with it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
any more questions for Mr. Pat?
What bait do you throw the most on your Carolina rig?
this time of year, lizards and brush hogs and my impact shads. In the summer, all I throw is that impact shad. That's about all I throw in the Carolina rig. It's like in the summer, it seems like they're feeding more, the deeper fish feed more on shad, because that's basically what's out there. There's not a whole bunch of bluegills out there, you know what I mean?
You using that biggin on that Carolina rig in summertime? They eating that big gizzard shad, right?
It depends, it depends on what kind of school you're fishing in. Sometimes they'll be feeding on them small shad. You can't catch them on that big one.
Right,
you got to go to that little one.
Do you find that's a big deal, matching the size of the bait?
Oh, yeah.
I think that's one of the most important things.
It really is.
In bait selection is getting the right size.
Yeah. And that's why here coming up, they eat that big swim bait, because them big gizzard shad are moving up.
That's right.
Once they're on them big gizzard shad, you better be throwing something big.
That's right.
Yep.
You fish the East Fork or the West Fork?
Both of them. Mainly this side over here. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't hear much about Texas rig or wacky worm on this lake.
Well, a lot of people throw wacky worms in the spring, especially when fishing gets tough. Especially when they're spawning, they'll hit a wacky worm pretty good. And then a Texas rig, I throw it quite a bit in the summer, especially if I'm fishing timber. If I'm fishing thick brush or timber, I'll throw a Texas rig most of the time, because the Carolina rig just hangs up too much. You know what I'm saying? And a Texas rig will slide right through that stuff. And usually, like right now, I'm catching some Texas rigging a big brush hog in that timber with a jig, I'll just switch back and forth. But usually the third week of May is when most of the fish start going back deep again. And Texas rigs are great once they start going deep again, especially when they get in the brush. It works great. And that's what, and like if you're up fishing points up shallow and stuff and open humps where there's not much brush, you can cover more water quicker with a Carolina rig. But once you get the target down like brush pile, then that Texas rig will work good going through it. Because you don't want to hang up a bunch in a brush pile where there's fish in it or you'll spook them. And that Texas rig just goes through it a lot better.
I have one more question.
Oh, yeah.
I think I heard you say stuff about the bridge pylons, but do you think it's worth a shot to maybe throw a swim bait at all these bridge pylons? Or not?
The things I would throw would be a swim bait or a fluke style bait on a grounder head in about a 3/8 ounce weight, 3/8 to half, and fish it about 10 to 15 feet down next to the side column. Okay. That's where they'll be. And then another bait would be that Alabama rig. It'll catch them.
I don't know what a scrounger rig is.
This scrounger, I think they got some here. What it is, it's a jig head, just regular old jig head, but it has a plastic bill that goes over the head, and the bill sticks up, straight up, not down.
Okay.
And it's flexible. So when a fish hits it, it just collapses. And another thing, if you reel it right through the timber, you can go right through all the timber without hanging up.
Okay. That sounds good.
Yeah, but that's a scrounger head. But, and you can take a paddle tail swim bait too, and put it just on a regular jig head without a scrounger and catch them too.
Okay.
It depends on if you want the action on the front or the back. If you want the action on the back, you use a paddle tail without the scrounger. If you want action on the front, sometimes you change it up, then fish will react to it different.
Okay.
Any more questions for Mark? All right, man. Hey, Mark Pack, thank you, sir,
Yes,
very
sir.
much. Can't say
Thank
thank you
you.
enough. Appreciate
All
it.
right. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Hey man, we appreciate it. Look, we done packed the house at him.
That's right. That's
Full
right.
house.
That's right.
That's how we do it when Pack Daddy comes.
That's it.
Hey, we appreciate all you guys coming. We know there's a big tournament going on. We wish y'all the best of luck in that. It's a good time for your fish. A lot of ways to catch them right now. And
There's a lot of ways.
a lot of ways. And this is one of the men that you want to listen to the most. This guy's been here. He's done it all in the fishing world. He's one of my personal heroes. I'm hoping someday he joins Mr. Stevenson in the Hall of Fame. He
That's
deserves
right.
it. He definitely deserves it. So he's done a lot, invented a lot of stuff, caught a lot of fish, won some major tournaments with Mr. Mark Pack. So what you want to talk about tonight, bud?
I'm going to talk about some structure fishing, what's going on right now, and how to try to beat the crowds out there and do something a little different. Because right now, most people are targeting, points and humps and road beds. And one of the most overlooked structures out there are the channel bends, creek bends. And right now, a lot of the fish are moving out off the banks, and they're, in fact, they just moved out last week because it got hot. So, what you want to look for in most of your major creek channels is where the creeks make a bend. And either where the creeks bend, usually on the outside edge of the bend's the best. And jigs, big worms, and I throw my big Lake Fork Impact Magic Shad out here on Lake Fork. And I throw it weightless a lot because some of the fish will suspend on them stumps. And a lot of people, when you flip, if they're suspended, it's hard to catch them sometimes flipping. And you can catch them doing it, but on a reaction bite, on a drop. But that shad works great in big worms and jigs. And like I said, you want to target the outside bends. And usually there's big stumps on them bends, and you can't see them unless the water's down. And that's one thing with the water up; it's hard to see a lot of that stuff. But you can concentrate just on fishing the bends. Another thing you want to look for is where two creeks come together. Like you have the main creek, and then little pockets come in, those ditches that drain into them. Because when those fish leave those pockets, they're going to use those creeks as highway just to travel. And then once they get to the main creek, they'll stop. And the reason they do that a lot of times is them shad migrate up and down in them creeks. And anywhere there's an ambush point, like the drops on the creeks, those are the ambush points. The fish sit right on them drops most of the time. And once some shad come over, it's an easy meal for them. Because bass don't like to chase things down if they don't have to. So you want to look for the ambush areas. And like usually, what I pay a lot of attention to this time of year on when they're feeding is I use the moon phases a lot. Like you have 2 minors and 2 majors in a 24-hour period. Usually have 1 minor and 1 major during the day and 1 minor and 1 major at night. So you always want to make sure you're on your best areas during the majors and the minors, because that's when they feed the best. And like right now, the minor right now is probably 9 to 10, 9 to 11, because it's an hour later every day. And then your majors are 6 hours later. So, and there's an app for everything, so you can find an app for that. But there's an app for everything. But you always want to make sure you're on your best stuff during the minors and the majors. And do your running around to other spots during the death time. And that'll make your time more efficient where you're catching more fish. Because you don't want to be running around when they're biting during a major or a minor. And that makes a big difference. And sometimes they'll fool you and they won't bite good during a minor and a major, but most of the time they do. I'd say 80% of the time they do. And if they don't, it'll have to do with either a front blowing in or wind switching directions or something. But when you have stable hot weather like this, the fishing's pretty good. And
more predictable, would you say?
yeah, it's a lot more predictable. But this year we started catching. I mean, this week we started catching some big ones out there. We had a customer a couple of days ago, or yesterday, I think it was. He caught one right at 10 pounds. So, and we was targeting a deep point on a roadbed where it dropped from 20 to 25 foot. And that's another thing to look at on them points that run out. You know, they're going to gradually run out, and then they're going to drop at the end. Usually they're going to drop off. And that's usually where the bass are going to be. And right now they're holding about 18 to 23, 24 foot. And the best spot's probably about 20 to 22 foot. And that's what you want to target. And it's always better to drag up the point instead of dragging down it. Because your bait's always, like on the Carolina rig, your bait's always on contact with that bottom and it's looking them right in the face when you're coming up. And if you go the opposite way, it kind of drops kind of fast and it moves a little too fast for them. But if you drag up that slope, that's always better. To always drag up the slope on them points.
Why is it? What is it about the outside bend that you prefer over the inside bend?
Okay, the outside bend is the steeper drop. It always is, because that's where the creek used to be before the lake filled up. And when you'd have all them heavy rains, it'd wash them bends out more of a vertical drop. And those fish like that vertical drop better than the sloping drop. Usually the steeper drops is where they're going to get. And it's the same way on them points. When it comes out, if you can find the steeper, say you have a point that comes out and just, you know, a round point that comes out, and somewhere on that point, there's going to be a steeper drop on it. And that's what you want to look for, is that steeper drop. And it's just an ambush area for them. So, and, but that's what's going on right now. Here in about July, when it starts getting real hot, the fish are going to start suspending out in real deep water, probably 35 and 40 foot. And all they're going to do is move out from where they are now, probably 50, 100 yards from that structure, just suspending 30, 40 foot, and they'll be about 15 foot down. And that's when you'll catch them. And I'll use that countdown method a lot with my shad, my impact shad. And you just throw it out and count it down. It falls about 6 inches per second. And count it down to about 30 seconds, it'll get you at 15 foot. And you want to use a twitch, and then pause it about 8 seconds. Twitch, 8 seconds. And that'll keep you at that zone, that depth zone that they're holding out. Because most people that I tell that, once I show them how to do it and they're in my boat, they get it. But a lot of people, I can tell them what to do and they fish it too fast. They get impatient. They'll twitch it twice, then they'll wait a couple of seconds, then they'll twitch it again. They get in a hurry. And by the time they get to the boat, their bait's already at the top. And that's how you'll know you're fishing it too fast, is once you get close to the boat. If your bait's pretty close to the top, you're fishing too fast. You want to make sure it's at least 15 foot down even when it gets to the boat, or 10 foot, pretty close to that.
On your deeper stuff, are you primarily using the bigger impact shad?
It depends on the bait they're using, but most of the time it's the big one. Because by that time of the year, the shad have grown up some and they're bigger. And a lot of times you're targeting them gizzard shad anyway, that they're feeding on.
Yeah, the bigger bass are going to want to feed on them gizzard shad. That's what they're going to stay on, right?
So,
hey, guys, if you haven't seen that impact shad, I've been using it shallow around grass and stuff. And, man, he did a wonderful job on this. He took kind of a soft plastic jerkbait or a fluke style bait and put a joint in it. If anybody's ever seen a glide bait, it's a hard bait that has a joint in it. Well, this is basically like a soft plastic version of that in some ways. And when you twitch that thing, when it dies, it glides. I mean, almost just like, I mean, it falls to the side. It's incredible action.
Yeah, it glides, and then when you twitch it on a semi-slack line, it'll turn on 180 degrees. If one's falling, you do that, and it turns and goes back at him, he'll usually hit it if one's falling it. So
it's an incredible bait, man. Yeah. Kudos to you. That was phenomenal.
And I usually put little chartreuse on the tail just to set it off where they can see it out there in that deep water. And my favorite colors for deep water in the summer is, when they're suspended, is that disco violet and disco green. But when I'm Carolina rigging on the bottom that deep, 20, 25, my favorite color is chartreuse pepper. Because anything on the bottom that deep, it's hard to see down there. It's dark. So you want something that little bright, and that's why I use that chartreuse pepper on that one. So, and I'll kind of do the same thing on a Carolina rig. Sometimes they want it drug real slow, but a lot of times I'll twitch it and get that bait moving behind that weight. And that's when you want a little longer leader, about 5 foot. And when you twitch it, that thing darts on the side behind that weight. If your leader's too short, it won't do it as much. So it's real important to have a longer leader. And when you twitch that thing, it just looks alive down there. And just little things like that will make them trigger and hit it. So you always want to try little different things like that, other than just dragging it real slow. Just kind of twitch it and stop it. It looks slack, twitch it and stop it. And a lot of times, if the bite's kind of slow, I'll stop it about 10 seconds before I move it again. Because that's when they'll hit it. A lot of times, if you twitch it too fast and then reel up and twitch it again, and you can't get a bite, and you can see them down there, just slow down your pauses. And that makes a big difference. Just little things like that make all the difference in the world in catching them and not catching them. But
so on that impact shad for the suspended fish, and then on the Carolina rig, talk to me about line. Fluorocarbon, mono leader to get on the Carolina rig. What do we do?
I always use fluorocarbon, only because it's invisible. But there's times a leader with mono is good because it helps the bait stay up a little.
Carolina rig.
Yeah, on the Carolina rig.
But on that deal where you're fishing the suspended one,
you always want to throw fluorocarbon because it sinks.
Right.
And on my shad, I throw a little bit bigger hook than I would on a Carolina rig, just to give it weight to help it fall to where I want it. Because I'll use about a 6/0 wide gap hook instead of a 5.
Yes, sir.
And that gives it that little more weight to help get it down there.
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Does it make a difference if it's a floating bait or not?
If you have a floating bait, it's going to take longer to get down there. Because my bait's got salt in it, which helps it sink too. But if you have a floating bait, you'll need a heavy hook, big, thick hook to help it get down there. And you can put, they make those hooks, with the belly weights on it.
Right.
And you can throw it on if you need more weight, like a 16th or an 8. If you get too heavy, it's going to fall too fast sometimes, and you're not going to keep in that strike zone as good. And it depends on how they're feeding. If they're actively feeding, you can get by with a heavier hook and fish it faster and still catch them. But when it's slow, sometimes you want your bait to, stay in that strike zone longer.
I just asked because I like fishing a lot of buoyant baits that get that action that you don't actually have to work it to get the action.
Right, yeah. I know what you're saying. But,
if any of you guys have questions at any time, man,
yeah, just ask. I was fixing to open up the questions anyway if y'all have any questions on anything.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
you're good.
I'm
not at all.
Because that's mainly the techniques I use. Like right now, you can catch them on moving baits better, like crankbaits. But here, mid-June, it's going to be hard to catch them on them power fishing. You got to slow down to get them to bite. You get so hot, they don't like to chase things down. They're lazy, the big ones are.
Right. I just.
But
I mean, I love worming. I love buoyant baits.
yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, that bait I'm throwing,
Yeah, I don't like worming.
she likes a chump and wine.
right? Yeah, that's action bait. But like I said, fish that shad slow and twitch. And plus, you know, the water's so deep, and you're up. You know, the fish are at 15. When you make a cast, when you twitch it, it's wanting to come up. And plus, you know, your angle of your rod is up here, and that bait's down.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That bait's going to shoot up.
It's wanting to come up. That's why you got to slow it down. Because if you get up too high, they can't see it. And plus, now if the water's real clear, it's a different deal on them clear legs. Because they'll come up to the top and hit it. On top water, you can get them to come up 15 foot. But out here, they can't see it as good. So, and it also depends on the clarity of the water too, on what they can see and what they can't see. But after you get out there, you do trial and error a lot. You can kind of figure out what they want. And I've kind of perfected that suspended fish. And they're the hardest ones to catch. But if you do that bait like I told you, through them like that, you'll catch them. You'll catch them. And like I said, like I said, about the end of June, once that thermocline sets in real hard, that's when a lot of them move out and start suspending. And most people are still fishing up there where they were. And there's a few in there, but most of them are out. They're deeper. They're over 40 foot out there. And a lot of times you'll be fishing up there, and out behind you can see them busting shad. And you're like, you know what I mean? It's because that's where they're at. They're out behind you. So.
I got a hypothetical for you on that suspended fish deal when it gets real hot, right?
Yeah.
And you get out there and you're throwing that big impact shad on a heavy hook with a weightless hook. What do we do when the wind blows? How do you make an adjustment?
Oh yeah, I always position the boat upwind from the fish, where the customers are throwing straight back. And I'll just hold it up there and I'll throw straight back with the wind.
Yeah. You add any weight or anything?
No.
No?
Because you're throwing with the wind.
Right.
Yeah. Because you don't want to throw sideways because that bait's going to move.
Oh yeah, it's going to ride.
You always want to throw back.
As long as it's fighting the wind, that'll kind of
just
help
make sure your boat's up from the fish under the wind.
Perfect.
That's the main thing. Any other questions?
Come on now.
I know y'all got some questions.
What about the bigger baits right now?
Do what?
What about the bigger baits right now?
Bigger baits?
Stuff like that.
Yeah, bigger baits are good.
Okay.
Another good bait out there too is throwing those big glide baits. You know? The ones that are sinking. You don't want a fast sink, you want about a medium sink, even a slow sink. Just get it down there where them fish are at. And it's always better to keep that bait right above them rather than below them.
Right.
Because they won't feed it too good looking down when they're suspended. They're always going to look up a little bit to feed.
One thing, if I can throw a thing in there for that glide bait deal, those suspend strips or lead tape. If you got a glide bait, you can wrap the shank of your treble hook.
Yep.
You know, if it won't get down there fast enough for you, just put some of that suspend strips or lead tape around the shank of your treble hook, and that'll help it.
And you can do the same thing to those wide gap hooks on that main impact shad. Is put tape around it if you want it to sink a little faster. So.
Come on now, ask him. Tell him what's his craziest tour story, whatever. Just ask him. He's like, no, I ain't doing it.
I can't tell those. They're too crazy, man.
All right, first time you fell out of a boat.
It was 8 degrees out here.
No,
it was
man. Come on.
It was in January.
Oh my goodness.
I was about 25 years old, and I hit a stump with my trolling motor, and I kept going. Back then we didn't have ladders in our boat, but I was a lot skinnier, so I could get out of the water. But yeah, it was cold outside.
I fell in this year while I was power pulled down, so the boat was dead still. I still fell in.
That's how like.
Yep. But a lot of times, like right now, the fishing is pretty good, but there's so many people out here, you got to do something a little different sometimes. And that's when I'll look for the channel bands up in the creeks. And one of the biggest things to look for in that pattern is them herons are going to be sitting where the fish are. They'll be sitting on a stump out in the middle of the creek. And I promise you, where you see that bird, there's a school of fish next to it. He's just waiting for him to bust them up where he can steal them from on top. And that's real important in the summer. Just look for them birds.
Are you setting off the channel bin and throwing in, or getting up on it and then?
I usually, like if there's a bend, and it depends on how the brush is too. I don't want too much brush between me and where I'm fishing so I can get them out of there. And a lot of times it doesn't matter because they're going to be on the edge of that creek. Sometimes I'll work it up that creek. It just depends on how the structure is. Usually it doesn't matter if you can get in front of one. So.
Hey, Pack, I got a question for you. I had some friends fish with you one time. Y'all were throwing a rig, and they were talking about you just kind of stroking the rig a little bit more.
Yeah, sometimes if you're trying to get their attention more, it all depends on the kind of mood they're in. Like I was telling them a while ago, I'll pop that thing and then kill it, trying to get them on down there and making that noise on that beat and that weight. And I'll do it with that shad twitching that thing, get more action out of it. But yeah, and then sometimes you got to fish it real slow and just try different things. I try to change things up because there's a lot of different ways. Fish are funny animals, man. Bass are hard to catch sometimes. You got to do funny things to make them bite. But
they don't read the same books we do they, brother?
No.
Not all the time.
No.
Mark, you may have went over this, but what you like throwing tungsten on your Carolina rigs, and then what size weight do you typically spool and then?
If I was a multi-millionaire, I'd throw it all the time. But you hang it up so much, you're gonna lose a lot of money. But if I was fishing tournaments, I would. Those customers, I just throw lead. But
and then line weight, do you differentiate from the spool?
Right now, since the water's not real clear yet, I'll throw 20. But when it gets real clear, I'll throw to 15.
Is your leader stronger than your main line? I
always keep it the same.
Same.
But
and then, are you a believer in the beads and the clackers and all that, or just straight?
I use beads, to make noise. And you can use clackers too. Sometimes it helps. It calls them to it in case they're a ways away. You can shake it and call them to it. And I like to do that a lot, just shake it every once in a while. Call them to the bait. And normally it works. But I always have a bead and a weight.
I tell you what, I like to use beads when I'm sight fishing, and you can tell the difference versus a solid rig and a noise rig.
Fly fishing?
Sight fishing.
Oh.
Some of them fish that won't come to the bed, you get a noise back there. I'm telling you, grab their attention, it does the same thing when they're out there.
That sucker don't do nothing but sight fish. He's the only person sight fishing in August. Ain't even no fishing in the
It's kind of true, a little bit.
Talking about sight fishing, one of the best tips I can give you for sight fishing, when you get a fish that you just can't get him to bite it, put a 1 ounce weight in front of that bait. See what happens. It falls real fast and it hits the bottom real fast, then they'll trigger on it.
Gets the blood pumping, doesn't it?
Yeah. What else? Any more questions?
What size weight? Yeah.
1 ounce on Carolina rigging. I use it in 3 foot of water and 30 foot of water.
Me too.
Because it just kicks up more silt on the bottom, makes more noise. It just kind of helps the fish find it. And there's times another customer will throw 3/4 and the other guy's throwing 1 ounce, and the guy with a 1 ounce will outfish the guy with a 3/4 ounce most of the time. And it's the same way with braid. I won't throw braid anymore on Carolina rig, even with a fluorocarbon leader. You just won't get as many bites. I don't know if they can hear the line sawing over that wood or what stuff, or what it is, or if they can see it. But if you go straight fluorocarbon, you'll catch a lot more fish. And here's another important thing on Carolina rigging. Always use a smaller hook on your bait that you can get a bite with. Because again, the lighter the hook, the more action your bait's going to have behind it, and the more bites you're going to get. Some people put a big hook on, bigger hook, and you just don't get as many bites. It kills the action of your bait behind when you're moving it. Because you want that bait to move a little bit back there behind it. If it's just coming straight, on the bottom. With that heavy hook, it's it's pulling it to the bottom, and it kills the action of it.
Do you keep your leader 5 feet all the time, or do you vary it, or what?
Pretty much 4 to 5 foot. Yeah, it just gives it more action. But the deal with the hook's a big deal. And I like light wire hooks most of the time on Carolina rig, not real thick hooks. I like just a round, bend, offset hook. Either a Gamakatsu or a Trocar or something. Just a lighter wire. Because that lighter wire, you're making real long casts, and a lighter wire will penetrate your mouth quicker too than a heavy wire hook. And it just doesn't weight the bait down.
Well, what about on a really big fish? Will it bend out?
Not if you back off on that drag. If you get a real big fish on, I mean, you can reel him in without bending the hook. Just back off on your drag a little. That way when he runs, he'll pull a little drag out.
On the one lighter wire hook, actually tearing the rest of the fish's mouth.
The lighter wire?
Yeah.
No, it penetrates quicker.
But I mean, on the hook set.
No, you don't want to, that's another thing on Carolina, you don't have to set the hook that hard. Just kind of sweep hook set him and start reeling. And the weight of the fish, when he turns, he'll hook himself most of the time. It's totally different than flipping and stuff.
Okay, because I've seen something about a lighter hook on a hook set actually.
Now don't go real light,
tears.
you know what I'm saying? Just a regular round bend offset. It's a lighter wire than most hooks. But it don't tear. Not if you have a good quality hook point. You know what I mean?
Right.
But like 3 days ago, I had a guy hook a monster bass. It was huge. I still can't sleep. It was like 4 days ago. It's one of the biggest fish I've ever seen. He threw out there and was dragging it, popping it on that shad. And that fish gets it, and he sets the hook. This fish jumps that high, and it's that freaking long. This head's that big. I mean, it's huge. I bet it was 16 pounds or more. I don't know. I don't know how big it was. And then he gets to the boat with it. I said, take your time, slow down. Because there ain't no brush rope where we're fishing. And he gets to the boat, and I said, back off on that drag. And he made just one little click. I said, back off. And that fish pulled out and broke him off. I was sick. It was a freaking giant, man.
Look here, when that man says it's a freaking giant, it's a whole other level of giant. I'm telling y'all.
Man, that was big. And I can't get back on that spot there because there's a crappie guy sitting on it. Doing please.
I wonder what that big old fish was eating down there, Mark. What do you think?
Them crappie.
Tell us where he's at, we're going to run him off.
Man, that's a big old fish. I'm still sick. I don't know. It was so big, I don't know how big it was. All I know is a giant, true giant. And it was fat, too. It's been eating them crappie, you know?
They get big when them crappie. It's like eating trout.
Oh, man, I'm still sick.
Well, that's the next question. What's the biggest bass you caught?
The 14. Yeah, and it made that one made that one look little. I promise. It was big.
Billy, what's your biggest bass?
Me personally or customer?
Out here.
Got 12-3. That 13-year-old boy almost beat it. He was 1 out short of it.
Yeah, I seen that video. He was excited, wasn't he? His dad was excited.
Hey, here's the coolest part about that deal, Mark. That kid, after he caught that fish, I bet he fished 45 minutes the rest of the day. He was in shock.
Oh,
He
yeah,
just
he-
sat in the seat. He was like, just looking around. He didn't know what just happened.
That's what happened to my cousin when he lost that fish. He was in shock.
Yeah, when you see them when they're, 12 pounders not on that level, but even, for a boy like that, a 12 pounder, that's something you just can't imagine how big.
And he was just a new fisherman, wasn't he?
He fished a lot. I mean, he could throw bait caster. He's been fishing a lot, but the biggest fish he caught before then was a 4 pounder.
That's amazing.
So we jumped it up there pretty good.
All right,
It was-
Billy, now ask him what was his biggest.
Mike, what's your biggest?
An orca whale.
Orca whale. Well,
1084.
You didn't catch that at Lake Fork. I'm pretty sure it was an orca whale.
No, I caught it at SeaWorld.
Yeah.
I was at 1084 at Go
1084.
Pool.
Very nice.
Very nice. And I'm proud of it. I haven't come close to it since.
You know he hasn't. I've come closer than he has.
It's a special deal when you break that double digit mark. That's a special deal, it really is.
It is.
Mark's done it probably 100 times, people in his boat at this point, but I mean, he's put in thousands of days to do that. I mean, real legit 10 pounders are a very special fish.
It is.
They are. They can be fight.
But the thing is, we've had such good spawns the last 3 or 4 years.
We're going to be in good shape next year.
Even all these 2 pounders we're catching right now, pound and a half, 2 pounders, a lot of those are fry from last year. That's how fast they grow. And the ones from 4 years ago, probably up to 6 pounds now. But it ain't gonna take long. In another 2 or 3 years, there's gonna be a bunch of 7 pounders, a bunch of them, like it used to be. But
we're in good shape for the next few years, that's for sure.
yeah, real good. As long as the lake stays full, you get real good spawns. But when it drops, the spawns drop off. But it's easier to catch the big ones when the lake gets low because it gains them up better.
In an ideal world, we would have all these spawns, and about 2 years from now, we have about 3 years of low levels, and then go back and forth, and then go back and forth.
Yeah.
And that's why you see a lot of these lakes fluctuate. That's why you hit such big home runs on Amistad, Falcon. When they hit those peaks, it's because of that fluctuation.
That's it.
Provides a good run of good spawns, good population, easy fishing. Good population, easy to get back and forth.
But you notice how when it got 70 degrees of water, it cleared up?
Yeah.
The water has to get about 7 degrees before the particles will fall out of it and get cleared.
There's actually, somebody was telling me one time, there's some type of microorganism that eats that stuff, that cloudy stuff in the water,
It's
and
just
they
gotta
don't
get warm.
They don't get active until the water gets warmer. So the hotter it gets, clearer it's gonna get.
Yeah, and the hotter it gets, you start seeing the big bubble, you know, the big fatty looking bubbles, and that all kind of goes together.
You good, bud?
I'm good, buddy.
Y'all good? Anybody got any more questions for Mark before we get him
Like
out
I
of
said, go out there and concentrate more on them channel bands with all them boats everywhere.
Yeah.
Just go up in them creeks, look for them herons that don't come.
So where all the boats are, that's where you want to fish.
I try to get away from them boats. Them boats are all going to be out on the main lake.
It's amazing how crowded.
But if you go up them creeks and just look for them channel bands in about 15 to 20 foot, you ought to find it.
That's good advice. Hey, you guys are talking to listening to a living legend here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
It means the world to me. Give him a round,
Y'all good luck tomorrow and the next day. Catch a big one.
Cool, I love family.
That's right.
The legend.
That's right. Hey, we're Hey, man.
Say hi to the people out there.
You too, guys.
Y'all seen him at the seminar. One of these days we're going to get on the water.
That's right. We're going to do it. We're going to do some tricks for them.
Do some tricks.
We're going to show them how to catch them.
Want to show them top secret guard stuff?
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Mark Pack, Lake Fork legend, one of my heroes and one of my very dear friends.
That's right.
You know, I can't help my own brother, but
Yeah. The biggest over's going to win this heater roll. That big 20 right here, man. That's 30 bucks. They're whacking them right now. They've already got like...
how many over the slot?
They've already got like 15 over.
So for you guys that may not know, Lake Fork has a slot limit. Can't keep anything between 16 and 24 inches. It's a big mass tournament.
Yeah.
So you better catch one over 24, and they've got how many? 15?
15 so far.
15 over the slot, and we're just in the first half of the first day.
That's right.
My goodness.
They're whacking.
You know what we call Lake Fork? That's just a gut place. You know what that is?
Ready to fall down.
That's it. It is, ain't it? It is, ain't no doubt. Hey, Mark, thank you for doing this, man. It's good to see you.
Yes, sir.
We'll see you on the water.
What are you gonna say on that one?
About as big as yours.
Say 4.5. Say 4.5. What do y'all think? I think it's 4.5.
And how big was yours?
5. Solid 5.
That's 5 if yours was a 5.
Oh man, that's a good one, dude.
Sushi!
Is that the sushi bass?
Sushi dinner! He's a jumper, ain't he? Ooh, he's barely hooked.
Oh man. I don't know. I think I'm gonna let you handle this one. Oh man. Oh, you're gonna get him. Are you gonna get him? Are you gonna get him? Dang it!
They're gonna do it, boy. Push it! And he's running late. Now, you're gonna need more rods than that to beat me today.
Oh no, I don't.
That's what they look like, Mo.
All right, let's wait.